everybody. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. My name is Martin Loffers. I'm the Chief Trend Watcher of Supply Chain Media. I'm also the Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Movement, quarterly magazine. Also a huge LinkedIn group, 50,000 members and more, bi-weekly newsletter, huge audience. And I have a huge audience today, almost 300 participants in this live webinar. And with this live webinar, we're going to talk about supply chain predictions for this year in 2026. From moving AI from hype to reality. And I'm very proud to say that I have an expert next to me. And, I might be a trend watcher, but, I have one of the most famous futurologists, at least from Scandinavia, but probably Europe and beyond. That's Magnus Lindkvist. Magnus, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. Thank you also for using an old picture where I still had more hair.
Yeah, but you look intriguing. So one thing, so we'll talk about later, you're a futurologist, but I couldn't find you on LinkedIn, so you're not on social media.
No, I quit social media 10 years ago. I found that it was a bit of a mental health issue. I found that social media was quite strenuous to use and didn't trigger so good feelings in me. Mm-hmm. And I also think there's something to be said about mystique in this world of transparency, whether it's for people or brands. So I think the less people know about me, the better.
Okay, but I have you a whole hour in this live webinar. One of the reasons why, of course, you were a keynote speaker at my Innovate event 2 years ago, but you have written this book, How to Make AI Useful. We'll talk about it later. And you have written it with MIT professor Bryan Reimer. And in the book, you compared yourself like the Pet Shop Boys.
So yeah, why? Well, I mean, I did most of the heavy lifting with writing, just like Chris Lowe, who does most of the instrument playing in Pet Shop Boys.
Yeah.
And Bryan is the flamboyant singer of our duo. He's like the Neil Tennant. So that was the brief we gave to our photographer. And if you look inside the book, you can see our Pet Shop Boys style picture.
Yeah. I can recommend the book, very much. So I've written a blurb for the book. But one thing, you dedicated this book to anyone in the world who is creating something.
Yeah, I mean, instead of going through a list of the usual suspects and husbands or wives or children, I thought, you know what? I admire anyone in whatever role or capacity who spends their day trying to create something. Could be something small, could be something big.
We talk about it later. We talk about AI. We talk about AI and supply chain. We talk about the near future and beyond. Some practical things for now. So the audience is on mute. But this will be recorded, and the recording will be available on YouTube within 48 hours. So you can chat among each other. So what kind of nonsense are we talking about, that kind of stuff. But if you have real questions, use the Q&A functionality on the right-hand side. You see the Q&A bubbles, the text bubbles. I will track if the questions do make sense and are relating to what we'll be discussing with Magnus. I will ask these questions immediately. If not, we have a Q&A at the end if we have time. But also we have an extra 30 minutes in the after talk. So that looks like this. So right after the whole hour, Magnus and I will be sitting down in the virtual lounge. You can join us, and then you have an actual conversation. Kind of Zoom meeting will pop up in this environment, and you can have a conversation with us. All right. As of this point, I will put off my camera, and Magnus will also put off a camera. So why you can enlarge your screen and have a better view on the slides. All right. So Magnus, you are a futurologist. Explain what a futurologist is doing.
Well, I'm actually going to put my camera back on because it helps me to focus. Sorry.
Okay, no problem.
So this is the joke I always say. A futurologist is someone who can't get a job in the present. I mean, I'm a reluctant business school graduate, film school dropout. I went to journalism school. I had a rock band. I have a management consulting background. I'm a novel writer, but none of these things went particularly well. And in the slivers of failure, I put the dream of futurology together 22 years ago. So maybe this session today is like a mixture of business school and failed rock stardom. Further down, you will see a quote. It's actually the historian Neil Ferguson, whom we all know and love, and he wrote this in a column. Futurologists need to do their homework. Otherwise, what is to distinguish them from tabloid astrologers? So I spend a lot of my time looking at data, looking at macro statistics, interviewing people, looking at stories, reading, trying to make sense and trying to create some kind of picture about where the world might be heading.
Yeah, clear. So, and you have a long distance view and also over time. So if you look at this, so what are we now?
Well, you see the source at the bottom if you want to go through it.
Yeah.
So this is basically looking at words per million related to the themes of progress in blue or caution in red. This enables us to go way back in the history of the printed word, back to the 17th century. And for a while there, you will see that there was no clear direction. And I think this is connected to the fact that we really didn't think much about something called the future prior to the Industrial Revolution. The idea that tomorrow or next year or next decade would be very different from today was quite unpredictable and unfathomable. Then you will see, early 1700s and certainly in the 1800s, all of a sudden we have this idea of progress and future and something new and exciting, sometimes technological, coming along. But then, of course, the end of the diagram, the last couple of decades, you see the world we are living in right now, where the idea of a better tomorrow is starting to fade, and it's being replaced by words connected to caution, worry, and risk. And I think all of you in the webinar today have sat in countless meetings in the past year where words like uncertainty or danger and turbulence have been thrown around, and that used not to be the case. If we go back to the 1950s and 60s, the future was just going to be vibrant and amazing, and we were going to live somewhere in the stars and have flying cars and long lifespans.
Yeah, and this is my take on the world. First you talk about books. So what is your future outlook for what's coming up?
Well, it's an outlook, right? So I had to pick some of the books being published this year. And on the left-hand side here, you see two of the most anticipated nonfiction titles. The Doom Loop by Edward Prasad, Why the World Economic Order is Spiraling into Disorder. But then the one I'm looking forward to is the historian at LSE, Odd Arne Westad, of Norwegian origin, but the coming storm. And he's doing what a lot of historians are doing right now, is that they do applied history. How can we look at patterns from the past to try to anticipate what's next? And Professor Westad is talking about a coming storm. And then on the right, you have last year's bestseller. And I think the title encapsulates the sentiment around, especially AI, that a lot of people are feeling. If anyone builds it, everyone dies. Why superhuman intelligence would kill us all. So three quite gloomy titles, to complement the diagram you just saw about words that we connect to the future in the 2020s.
Yeah. If we get down to our world of global supply chain, we have seen a lot of black swan, and maybe people who have seen me presenting in the webinar or live, this is quite familiar. So you see a lot of black swans, like COVID starting, war in Ukraine, Gaza, and then Trump elected last year, and he's only around for 1 year. And look at what he's been doing so far. Then again, you see, Iran, Nexperia. I hope that people in supply chain, Nexperia, now in Chinese hands, but the headquarters in Netherlands. Basically, it's leading to shortages and it's leading to bullwhips, and basically, talking about economics, we talk about stagflation. So that's high inflation, relatively high inflation, maybe not so high like a few years ago, but also stagnation in that sense. So that's what we see.
Hold on, if you just stay on this, I'd like to just say one thing.
Yeah, please do.
I know we've been fixated on the concept of black swans and highly unpredictable events. I would argue that the ones you've outlined here, a pandemic, a state takeover of an Xperia, Venezuela, Trump, and so on, they are really, in the long run, not particularly unexpected.
No.
The problem was that we lived in, at least in Holland and Sweden and some other countries, in a period of extreme stability in the 80s and 90s.
Yep.
So we forgot what the world can offer. And we started to tell a story that pandemics and wars were things that only happened in the past. And as I always like to say, unexpected is not a comment about the world. It's not the role of the world to behave according to your expectations. It's a comment on our lack of imagination. And I think that's why we tend to think about these things as impactful and unpredictable events when they really aren't in the long run that unpredictable.
No. If you're reading science fiction, you all aware that this can happen. It's all in there in the books. So basically, if you relate it to your business nowadays, it's not unexpected. They are gray rhinos.
Great. Well, yeah, and let's just pack that up, because if you haven't heard that, a gray rhino, a black swan is a very rare animal, but nearly every single rhino you see is gray. And they move slowly towards you, and they are very dangerous if they get close to you. And that's what many risks now are. They are fully predictable. You can see them moving slowly towards you, yet a lot of institutions and companies choose to do nothing. So I would argue that many of these things in this diagram are gray rhino risks, not black swans.
So 2 weeks ago, we had a lot of snowfall in the Netherlands, Schiphol, 3 days, millions of people couldn't fly, hundreds of planes couldn't fly. Basically, that's unheard of. I think, last time we had this kind of snow was, I think, 10 years ago, whatever. Heathrow has experienced, and we didn't have enough fluid for, de-icing, that kind of stuff. But we couldn't, it's not a black swan. It was a gray rhino, and, we should have been prepared. And these are things, and these are slides. I've seen it before, and I've showed it before. These are the things CEOs are talking about in their quarterly earning calls. So in a similar way, like your graph with wordings, these are the transcripts and being set in a diagram. In blue, you see the supply chain related ones. In yellow, the IT related one. In red, the disruption related ones. So this was Q3. So AI is over there, and uncertainty, and that's probably the main one. So what's your take? And you look at this, these are the things CEOs are talking about.
Well, this week, everybody's talking about Davos.
Yeah.
And a word that came onto my radar only in the past 2 weeks, given a few things you see here, is the word re-globalization. And I think we're going to talk more about that in 2026, because what we are seeing happening now is actually not a deglobalization, but a re-globalization. All of a sudden, it's been negotiated for like 25, 26 years. The Mercosur EU trade agreement was signed. Signed, exactly, in the European Parliament. You see a lot of outreach from European companies, both to LATAM and also, of course, to Asia and China in particular. So I actually think that a lot of the metrics we associate with globalization will actually increase in the coming couple of years, but it will be done in a way where unreliable part of the chains might be left outside. Secondly, of course, a lot of people are moving from selling to the US to establishing their own operations in the US because of tariffs. So re-globalization will probably start to emerge here as both a challenge and an opportunity sometime in this or the next quarter.
Yeah, and this is the latest one from Q4. So the Q1s will be created at the end of this quarter. But I do agree, Mercosur and also trading agreements with India is coming up. So I expect that because of Trump, tariffs, that kind of stuff, we will find new trade agreements. And re-globalization, yes, we will find that. So that's the thing.
Because we're promising AI here, I want you to take a moment here just to go down and look at the 0% line. On the left-hand side there, you see Grok, which 2 weeks ago exploded because they, of course, infamously added a feature where you could put anyone, your wife, a celebrity, a politician, in a bikini. And this is the first time we're seeing a kind of generative, it's not quite pornography, but it's something undesirable. And of course, the Swedish vice prime minister came out and forced on social media because she had been put in a bikini and she did not want her 9-year-old daughter to see that, and so on. And she was also doing hunting, so she sort of unarmed her weapon, her shotgun. It was quite an impactful video. This we expect to see a whole lot more of, the ability of individuals to generate, movies, clips, images, and it asks completely new and interesting questions for us, good or bad.
No, but it's good that you mentioned, but Elon Musk has decided to get rid of this functionality in Grok now. So basically, you are not able to do that anymore. So that's the good news. But and it's strange that Elon Musk has to decide as a person that this functionality within Grok should disappear. So
which, I mean, you can do that with a lot of different tools online. Grok was just the most visible, and it's quite a controversial service, both Grok and X. It also comes to show the value of human judgment and the judgment of leaders. Which, I mean, it's Elon Musk has become somewhat unpredictable and slightly unreliable, but again, it points us into a direction where we'll see a lot more of these things coming up in the next year.
So more into the supply chain, physical goods. So we have seen different waves, economic waves, macroeconomic waves in the last centuries, and that's also related to your book because you made an analogy of electricity, the rise of electricity in 1900 and beyond, and you've seen it. So it started out with the steam engine, and then you get the railway electrification. So take it from there. So you have electricity from the 1900s. So and then you see all rise and falls. So why did you look at electricity as an innovation for your book?
We found an article in Electrical Experimenter magazine from the year 1919, and they had gone to something called the New York Electricity Fair, and they'd looked, and it was a bit like a CES but with electricity, and in New York, not Las Vegas, and they were speculating about how this fairly new and impactful technology would affect us all. And in the book we have the cartoon. And they had things like electrical light bulb bathtubs, which would probably be dangerous. And they don't say lamp, they say electrical vase light attachment. And they say electrical washing machine will turn your wash day into a joy day. I mean, it's so cute and quaint. And when we saw that, we realized that they're only thinking about electricity as kind of like a personal gadget. Like an app, like a chat bot almost. They're not thinking about a grid. They're not thinking about how it might change manufacturing or impact, work hours and so on. And that's when we realize this is a good and interesting parable to talk about the long-term usefulness, not just the wow of AI. Electrification in the US took about 40 to 50 years. From the turn of the century to the 1950s. In the early 1950s, the majority of the American continent was electrified. It took a little bit longer in parts of Europe because it's more scattered and different jurisdictions. And I think this is something we need to keep in mind, which is why I like this idea of the waves you're describing here. Things take longer to have an impact on a societal level.
And if you look at it, we came to the fourth wave. That's automobiles, petrochemicals, the start of marketing in the 50s and the 60s. Mad Men, the series on television, is about the 60s of marketing, etc. Then we come into the fifth wave of information technology, computers, the kind of stuff. And that wave ended, in the beginning of the century. And now we are getting into the new wave. And the new wave is about microbiology and AI. And that's the thing. And getting back, you also talked about the .com bubble, and you talk about the Alta Vista trap. Maybe you can explain a bit about that.
Well, as you can see, I'm follically challenged, so I'm obviously old enough to remember this, but many of you here today might have surfed the internet, and we did call it surf the internet, not poking around, which was actually more of the experience. And that was sometime, 93, 94. We were searching for metaphors as well. So I remember it was called for a little while the information superhighway. And we were battling standards. Would it be modem pools or mosaic? And what's interesting, if you look at the companies on the right, that were sort of signified of that first phase, they were all built by boomers who had already had a career in the old economy. So they were like middle managers who saw the internet as a business development opportunity, as kind of a channel. Let's sell our pet food online, or let's make our newspaper as a PDF online. Alta Vista came out of digital equipment. The idea was actually to display the power of a new processor they had built, the Alpha processor. And the idea here was to create this very powerful centralized processor for people to ask queries. And from, I guess, 1995 to 1999, it was a world leader because it was better than the junk that was out there. But of course, Google had a completely different approach. And we will get to that shortly. But Google realized, no, we don't want one powerful central processor. People were going to be searching on all kinds of local devices. So let's create something that is much more decentralized, that might work on computers, big and small, or tablets, or personal digital assistants, as they were called then. So most of the things you see here failed, some of them spectacularly. And I think we are in a similar route with AI right now. If you look at companies like OpenAI, if you look at NVIDIA, it's a hardware-driven financial bubble. It is built still on old assumptions. It is people coming maybe from the internet economy or the dot-com economy, trying to adapt to this new tool. So it's early days, and it's worth to bear in mind when we see new changes. Bubbles form all the time. I mean, railways was a bubble in the US, but all the companies went bankrupt, but the rails themselves were still on the ground. With the dot-com bubble, eToys and Pets.com went bankrupt, but the fiber broadband was still laid down on the ground. And the mindset of connecting things together had been planted in our heads.
So the infrastructure remains, just like in the gold rush, the people who got rich were selling shovels and spades, that kind of stuff. So that's remaining. So and you see, but then again, after this glitch,
this is what we call a balloon.
Yeah,
a bubble pops and disappears.
Yeah,
real estate in Sweden in the 1980s is an example. It was just fictitious value and air. A balloon can be deflated, but then reinflated and grow bigger and stronger. And I think that is what we're looking at. It's certainly what happened to the whole internet economy. It's what we will be looking at with the AI economy as well.
So this is, we have seen two waves. So the fifth wave, just left behind, is all about efficiency, squeezing the supply chains, getting rid of inventory, that kind of stuff. And now we're in the middle. And in the middle between the two waves, if you look back at the other waves, that's where the wars and the revolutions are taking place. So we are actually in the middle of that phase, and we see it around Ukraine, Venezuela, you name it. That's where a revolution, Iran, is taking place. Now we are, at the start of the sixth wave, whereas innovation is taking place. So that's here. So we are here, and that's also the phase where creative destruction is taking place, where companies will either survive or stumble. So when you look at this, what do you see in the market if you look at for them for the future?
Well, first time you showed me this model, I thought it was one of those kind of numerology things where you can anticipate changes ahead of time. Then I realized it was much more descriptive. And when you mentioned wars, because that is, of course, a sensitive and challenging subject, but many wars are preceded by some kind of financial chaos and turmoil. I'm married to a woman who came as a refugee of war to Sweden from Bosnia-Herzegovina. She was born in Sarajevo in what was then Yugoslavia. And what a lot of people might not be aware of is that Yugoslavia in the 1980s had a massive financial meltdown, hyperinflation, couldn't balance the budget. So a lot of things that had kept Yugoslavia together, prosperity, for instance, and economic equality, were starting to crack. And infamously, some leaders decided that instead of going free capitalist market, we will aim for nationalism instead. So as the old models break, very often we see economic upheaval and crashes. The unrest in Iran over the past few weeks have many causes, but one of them is the fact that the entire mullah regime is crackling under the weight of economical burdens. What I see right now is almost like a two-tiered world. We see a rebalancing of politics. Politics is behaving a lot like disruptor companies are doing, in the way they talk, in the way they suggest, in the way that you say, let's just do things, let's just try things out. Not always particularly democratic, but certainly experimental, if dangerous. I see many of the incumbent firms are still doing quite well. So we haven't really seen a breakthrough for new and different ways of building companies. Europe is good at many things, including digital startups, but Europe has a big legacy, France, Germany, Holland, Scandinavia, of companies that have been doing well for a very long time. So I think it will take a little while before we see massive upheaval in the kind of enterprise space, simply for the reason that we have a legacy of incumbents, both as employers, as provided a welfare and building the export-driven economies we all live in.
So this slide, and I added 3 phrases in red on top, because somewhere there's a gap. So what we've seen, and you can explain it in the phases. So there is something to jump over, and now we are in the middle, I would say. So if you look at this, you have the wow, the whoa, and the grow. So how do you compare to the phrases into this graph?
Yeah. So I should add here. Well, first of all, Martin, people will have a chance to get the slides if they want.
Yeah, of course. It will be downloadable.
Yeah,
because
of course. Some of these are quite information rich.
I know.
So in the book, we divided it into 3 structures of a new technology: the wow phase, the whoa phase, and then the grow. The wow phase in AI is where we've been in the past few years. Look what it can do. It can create these new images or lifelike movies or deep fakes. It could write a novel. It can help you transcribe and translate. It really is a wow tool. But then we get to woe. And the woe phase is when we start to ask questions about the long-term utility. So let me give you one example of our book. Me and Bryan Reimer interviewed David Dixon, who's the head of AI and education at MIT. And he started to talk and give examples of studies that show what an amazing learning tool AI is. It's all in the book, but as a tutor, students who have had AI only tend to do better than students who have had classroom-led education only. I mean, there's so much potential. But then we realized we said the same thing about YouTube 15 years ago. We said that YouTube will enable children in Botswana to have the best math teacher in the world. And it will enable you to search for information for free on Wikipedia. It was a wow face of the new web. Fast forward to today, and we see that a lot of companies and countries are looking at banning social media for people below the age of 16. Australia just did that. We see that a lot of classrooms and schools have prohibit smartphone use. So what was once seen and probably is a really good and exciting tool, when it comes up against societal institutions like school and education, it tends to come up short in the short run. The status quo doesn't like losing its status, and it will fight back. And I think we mentioned Grok. We have an ability today to produce nude pictures without anyone having to dress off.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't necessarily mean we should, even though we could. And that's a bad example, but there are many good examples as well. But people will have a hard time to let go of the old.
Yeah. And that's
then the grow phase.
Yeah.
Just briefly talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
In our book, we use the examples of ticket tap boxes on tram and rail stations. So if you go in Amsterdam now, or Copenhagen or Stockholm, if you're going to travel by train, you take your smartphone and you tap it against the box, and that's the ticket payment. That took about 30 years to come true in the internet economy. Imagine saying to someone in 1994 that in the future you will use your phone to pay for your ticket and there won't be any paper. I mean, it would have been, even in 1994, unfathomable. My phone is something I have at home, and what do you mean? Am I gonna tap it? It's so big, and what does tap mean? So what we call one technology, internet or AI, is actually a number of technologies and engineering working together, accumulating over time. And I have no reason to believe it's going to go faster than 30 years this time around.
Yeah, and it's also the prediction of economists of the waves. They're getting shorter and shorter. If we saw the macroeconomic waves, this is Amara's law. So basically, it's stating, we tend to overestimate the impact of technology in the short term, and underestimate it in the long term. What's your take on this?
Well, the thing is, we're actually quite good at underestimating technology in the short term as well.
Yeah.
Because in the short term, it's mainly about hype and valuations. But the idea of using a new technology to change things deeply is very abstract. So let me give you one example with electricity. Factories, if you go into old cities like, you take Hamburg or Birmingham, for instance, you see that the old factory buildings are all vertical. They're built for height because that's where power came from. It was steam. In steam rooms, the steam engine would always be at the bottom, and then it could travel upwards in order to power the rest of the steel mill or textile mill, whatever it may be. It took a few decades before somebody realized, hold on, with electricity, we don't have to build vertical factories anymore. We can build them horizontally. And then, of course, Henry Ford looked at slaughterhouses in Michigan and said, we could copy that way of doing it. And instead of having workers move around, we have the product moving and the worker being stationary. That kind of second order effect is so abstract. And secondly, of course, we can never predict the invention of the wheel, because if we could, we would already have invented it.
Yeah.
And this, I believe, is why we, even though AI is a hyped financial bubble right now, we are still underestimating its long-term potential.
Yes. And when you look at, buildings, so now, in the US, you have huge warehouses in the middle of nowhere, the land is costing nothing. But now, even the Western companies like Henkel is building a warehouse in a city, and with a high rise to distribute goods also to the customers. And you see already in China, you see warehouses like skyscrapers. The land is very expensive, and inner cities. And so now in China you have warehouses like skyscrapers, and even you have combined with people living in it. So it's getting back.
Two thoughts here. 15 years ago, I was very bullish on the 3D printer. I was absolutely convinced that it would, especially when it comes to supply chain and manufacturing, I thought we would have at-premise manufacturing, so the local bicycle shop would download a blueprint and print the bicycle for you. I believe there would be much more widespread use than we've seen. It's sort of like a hobby tool today, and for some really heavy equipment manufacturing, like Boeing, I know, use it for part of its airplane wings. Again, it comes to show that we tend to underestimate things even in the short run. Secondly, one of the most exciting things I've seen with supply chain in the past few years is consumer to manufacturer manufacturing. This is also a big trend in China. But so, for instance, you take your smartphone and you say, I'd like that the chair should look like this, and then it's sent to the manufacturing capabilities of Alibaba, say, and you get a perfect replica of that chair back. So, for instance, my brother who works for IKEA, they lived in Shanghai. They saw beautiful patio furniture at the local Starbucks in Shanghai, and they said that would be perfect for our garden. Photograph sent to Alibaba, perfect quality replicas sent back. This, of course, poses dangerous questions for copyright law and so on, but it shows how we might be looking at a complete flip of the supply chain in the long run.
Yes. And of course, and I've been to the military. I introduced a 3D printing company to the military in the Netherlands. You have spare parts, and holding on to spare parts is quite expensive. But if you scan it, they now have a lot of spare parts, and they don't have CAD/CAM 3D scans of it, or prints, or blueprints. But they scan it, and they get rid. They sell it off to Ukraine, whatever, and now they have in a warehouse just 3D spare part prints or scans, and then they need it. You print in metal or whatever these spare parts, so you don't need these huge warehouses. So defense in the Netherlands is already using it, and and that's something. Even in Ukraine, they are looking at how to print spare parts for the military over there. So that will come around.
Yeah, absolutely. And in Sweden, with the gang violence, we have seen the rise of ghost guns, of course, 3D printed guns, very hard to detect, hard to regulate for. So it's starting to come. But I thought 15 years ago that this would be the new normal by the year 2020, and it turned out it wasn't. So again, going back to Amara's law, I think it shows us the importance of humility for long-term impact of technologies, for instance.
Yeah. So this is the AI bubble, and I have taken a picture of the investments. And when you look at this, will it burst? What is your prediction as a futurologist?
It depends what you mean by burst. Will all of these companies disappear? I don't think so. As Google is not in there anywhere, right? I mean, the big success of the past year, the most impressive success, is the second coming of Google, who are now becoming increasingly the world leader in AI. And only a few years ago, we and they themselves thought they were doomed. They looked at the number of Google searches going down. They looked at the rise of this new technology. Sergey Brin had retired, something he calls a big mistake, and they came back. I would say NVIDIA, because NVIDIA, they did not come from AI engine room parts. They came, of course, from graphical processing units. It's a case of something called acceptation, where you use something invented for a different field and apply it into a new field, so like cross-fertilizing. I'd say NVIDIA is probably the one who would be superseded by new specialist chips, just like Intel was.
Yeah, and NVIDIA, those chips were built for the gaming industry, for
yeah,
PC
and
games.
Intel were at their best with PCs and laptops. So here's the thing: we haven't found the killer device for the AI boom yet. We're still working on the old model, which is smartphones. And when the internet was new, we worked on the internet with the old machine park, which was stationary PCs. And it took the smartphone to really turbocharge the online movement and make it something that could affect the real world. So this map that you're showing here will be reshuffled once the Steve Jobs of the next generation presents whatever the iPhone will be and look like. Will it be a pebble? Will it be a piece of jewelry? Will it be invisible? Will it be an implant? We don't know yet.
So and now talking about AI and talk about also geopolitics. So first the real revolution. So maybe briefly before we get to the chess part.
No, so I mean, Mark Zuckerberg, he was a young teenager when the dot-com bubble happened, and then he became a college student. And you know the creators of everyone, Evan Spiegel, Snap, you have the guys with Airbnb. All of them were children and teenagers in the 90s when the former CEOs and middle managers were building the internet that then collapsed. Similarly, today, the people pioneering AI, you showed some of the companies, with Satya Nadella and Sergey Brin and Larry Page and so on. They are kings of the old world. And right now, there are 17-year-old guys, girls, and non-binary individuals with radically new and interesting shifts. And once they start turning, 25, 27, 31, that's when we'll start to see really interesting things, because they will be AI first business models, of which we see relatively few right now if you take away the chatbots.
Yeah. So before we end up with the disruption on supply chain, we have them. Talk about chess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I created this slide, but you have a slightly different take. What I wanted to show here, and I think everybody watching today feel that we are sometimes stuck in this tension of time, a temporal tension. There's so much talk about geopolitics, but geopolitics is ancient, right? It's been around for millennia. The Economist this week talks about gunboat trade, which is why, the East, the Ostindische Company, and so on. It was, you took a ship, some cannons, and you went to places and you conquered them to get resources. Geopolitics is an ancient game that we are still in 2026 forced to think about and react to. On the other hand, we have the modern, or even the ultra modern. We have technologies capable of doing things that we haven't seen before. Whether it's outsourcing an entire department to automation, or radically overhauling our product development. So I've spoken to a lot of people in the pharma space who say a lot of pharmaceutical research is still done surprisingly analog, with human hands, petri dishes, and a wet computer, aka a brain. Imagine the speed if we could just automate this, and start, instead of looking for one protein compound for a few months, you would have something looking for new protein compounds 24/7 en masse. And I think the tension created here, we see it certainly in supply chain. Blockades, instability, Kaiser Wilhelm-like leaders, Trump. But on the other hand, of course, a magical toolkit which nobody is mastering just yet. So that's That's why in the middle there's a spark, there's a temporal tension. It's exciting, it's frightening.
Yeah. No, my take is, we in supply chain or in business, we are playing not on just one chessboard. We are playing simultaneous chess on different boards in different geographies at the same time. That's the thing. And even you can use AI to enhance that. Now we get to the supply chain. So now, basically, that's my take, and maybe you can relate to that. So my take is, we talk a lot about AI, but in supply chain, it's just an assistant. And then in the background with the illustration, you see some experiments, and if you don't know how to drive, your car will hit the post. So basically, it's an assistant. So that's my take where we are right now in supply chain with AI. What's your take?
I agree. I see very few interesting enterprise-wide initiatives. Some of the ones that were done, so Klarna, for instance, the Swedish payment company, they had to roll back. They thought they were going to be able to outsource their entire customer service department to majority AI, and they had to roll that back. So it's still a kind of personal assistant. It's an automatic secretary, if you will. And moving from the individual tool to an enterprise utility is probably going to take another decade or so.
Yeah. So, and this is about digital supply chain twins. 100 analysts from the US and UK. They made a prediction for last year in 2024. Basically, they predicted by then in 2024. So they said 40% of companies will integrate digital twins into their operations by 2025. But they were looking back, I think it was earlier this month, and they said, reality check, when we look at the figures, only 20% or 22% of companies are hiring for digital twins. So basically, their prediction was wrong. What you see right now, you still have a lot of engineers in the background connecting your old ERP, WMS, TMS, and other kind of legacy system to create a digital twin. It looks like SimCity on your screen. That was, my take on last year. Now we see technology evolving rapidly. My prediction is in 1, 2, 3 years, 3 years at the most, that this kind of supply chain planner in front of it would be able to connect these dots herself, and the engineers won't need it. Of course, by the data quality, etc. The connection, if they are there, if you have a data layer, I think the companies who are aware of what they need and they have a data lake, then they should create their data twins, the digital twins. So what's your take, Magnus? Will it take?
I think a digital twin might be a beautiful killer app of the AI revolution, because in your picture here, you see how cumbersome the digital twin projects have been in companies. It's been about implementing very cumbersome and expensive consultancy processes and hardware. Something I look at now is games design, because game design is going to be upended by AI. You've had to program worlds so far, but we're starting to see experiments of Katja Hoffman working with Microsoft is creating a fully AI rendered computer game that is as infinite as life itself, and it's self-generative. This is a beautiful and interesting field to look at for digital twin, which has lacked that kind of super ease of use, the experimentalism that people will want to use digital twins for. But to your point, we're not there yet.
No. And of course, in the gaming world, you have the Unreal Engine, creating a virtual world, and that's looking great.
Yeah.
And that's been used in the filming industry. And I think, we're getting there. But the main thing is you need to have a data lake with connecting all your cumbersome applications you see in the background. Otherwise, if you're not there, you won't get there. Robots, humanoids. So Forrester for the coming year, 2026, they say only a few humanoid robots will get paid to do useful work. That's the Forrester 100. There are more gung ho, and they expect significant growth in the usage. Not buying them, but the usage of robots, robot application physically. What's your take when you look at this different kind of robots, humanoids versus the other ones?
Well, the robotic field has been flat for a few years in terms of sales and installations. Robotic stocks, as opposed to AI stocks, have been relatively flat. So it has under-delivered. 15 years ago, again, we thought robots will be everywhere. You look at your picture, one of the problems is, of course, the bipedal humanoid form. Humans are really poorly designed. If you, like me, are in your 50s, you too will have struggled with your L5 vertebrae, which comes from the fact that you have one little vertebrae which is supposed to put the entire body together. And if you're also going to have a battery, a self-sufficient battery, and connectivity, machinery in the robot, it's going to get even more heavy. So the one on the floor there is probably the most interesting. Things that don't look and feel like bipedal humanoids. If you Google slime robots, you see a nanobot which is able to explore spaces. It looks like a piece of slime, but it's made out of nanobots. In our book, we have something called the coffee test, which is the new big test for AI. You remember Alan Turing coming up with the Turing test. Will a computer trick you to think it's human? And now ChatGPT can. But the coffee test is more interesting because the coffee test is about having a machine enter an average home and make a cup of coffee. And a human like you and I, we could do this relatively easy. You can go into my home and yours, and we can start to anticipate coffee, kitchen. Where's the kitchen usually? Where is coffee in the kitchen usually? Does he have a mocha master or an espresso machine? Do I have to boil it? We can do it. Very, very hard to program for, which brings us into the standard of AI. Of course, we have large language models today, but Jan LeCun, when he left Meta a few months ago, started to talk about world models, or the NEPA model, which, like humans and animals, learns not by words and tokenization of words, but learns by looking and drawing conclusions about physics. If I ask anyone here on this call, imagine a ball bouncing down a staircase, your brain is not first turning that into text. It is using a visual input based on what you've seen and the knowledge about how balls are bouncing. So once we start to implement world models into AI training, then we'll see some really exciting robot progress. Maybe even cracking the coffee test.
Okay, I'm curious to see. And this is another one. On the left, you see Mount Trump, vomiting all kind of tariffs into the world, and you see supply chain rearranging. So basically, Forrester, the analysts predict over 50% of global manufacturers will refocus supply chain leadership on growth, redesigning. Manufacturers are shifting from economies of scale and supply chains optimized for cost to economies of scope and supply chain networks optimized for resilience. And you mentioned already the Mercosur. So companies are looking for growth markets, South America. We are watching, maybe the trade agreements with India. So that's
yeah. I think that's exciting, and I think that's part of the reglobalization. I'd also like to put here, a volcano like Trump is predictably unpredictable. You don't know exactly when it will erupt, but you know that it will. So I'd like the supply chain industry to talk less about black swans and the cliche of uncertainty and more about gray rhinos. I mean, there is one, maybe even 10 ways of solving the snow at Schiphol problem. So it's just a matter of getting the agency to do it in the company. And I think part of using black swans and unexpected has been a blame game. A lot of politicians have used it they don't have to take any responsibility. It's so uncertain and unexpected. And I think we should demand of ourselves and our leaders to go beyond that.
So finally, and then we get to your final conclusion and your predictions. So decision intelligence with the use of AI agents. So the Gartner analyst predicts for 2026 and 2030. By the end of 2026, death by AI legal claims will exceed 2,000 due to efficient AI risk guardrails. By 2028, you can read 90% of the B2B buying will be AI agent intermediated, pushing over a lot of money. And by 2030, 70% of large organizations will adopt AI-based supply chain forecasting to predict future demand. And you see on the left, a digital twin with AI. Now at the moment, yes, the companies who are advanced are using AI agents for transport management or for procurement, but they do not let AI agents talk to each other. That's too dangerous, and they don't know what to expect. So, but that will be the future.
Again, it comes to show, and I think Gartner even says that generative AI will be in the trough of disillusionment in the coming year.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing institutions strike back. We're seeing incumbents being unable to experiment with new potential, again, pointing us to the fact that we'll have AI first enterprises with the AI natives who are today in their teens or maybe even childhood years. When they start to create, we'll see interesting things.
Yeah. And maybe, Gartner, they have these predictions. They point at the future to some point, and they mention it. Maybe the years are not correct. They may be later on.
Which brings me to my predictions, right?
Yes.
Before you go to them. So in the book and in my life, hold on, just go back one picture. I don't want people to read ahead.
No.
If you take it back, okay. The when is always difficult. So 6 years ago, I was asked by Dagens Industri, the big business daily in Sweden, to make some predictions for 2021. And I made 10 easily falsifiable predictions, so like precise statements, so I could evaluate, and people could evaluate me afterwards. Was he right or wrong? And in 1 year, I got one thing right out of 10. Generously speaking, and that was the direction of the stock market. I predicted 20%, it rose by 26%. All the others I got wrong, but as of this year, 6 of my 10 predictions came true. If what I'll actually do, I'll send you the predictions made, the article. People can do it by themselves. And in the spirit of easily falsifiable predictions, ladies and gentlemen, go to my next slides. Here's what I predict for 2026. Norway gets the most medals at the Winter Olympics in a few weeks. Microsoft buys OpenAI, even more pronounced now when Apple partnered with Google instead. The S&P 500 closes the year up 12%, and that seems unfathomable given last week's turmoil, but I'm bullish and optimistic. That's how I invest. We will see the first trillion-dollar company now outside of big tech. Brazil wins the World Cup this summer. Chinese author Kan Sui wins the Nobel Prize in Literature. And the first song to reach number one on the Billboard Hot 100 that is primarily composed by an AI system. This already happened on the Spotify top list in Sweden last week, leading to Spotify banning AI-generated songs. So I'll see everyone in a year, and then you can say it was all wrong. He's obviously full of shit. Or maybe 2, 3, hopefully all of them are right.
Yeah,
thank you.
So, and what is your recommendation to the audience?
Well, this is from when I spoke at your beautiful event, Innovate. I believe is your keynote speaker official as of this summer?
Steven van Belleghem. Yeah,
Steven van Belleghem, a person we know and love. So he's speaking. But this is when I spoke with you 2 years ago, reminding everyone that future is a verb. It's something you can do. If you look elsewhere and dare to be different, you experiment more, you dare to suck, you dare to be bad at things, you seek creative friction, and you look for not butterflies, but caterpillars, strange, slimy, ugly, contrarian ideas. That's where tomorrow is born. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So we have only 2 minutes time for questions, actually 1 minute. So, one question from the audience. How do we help academics to get up to speed? So training students of today that will become executives of tomorrow means they will be ready for the world of employment tomorrow.
McKinsey did a study last year looking at which areas in society will grow in economic size and scope and which will shrink given... Ow, shit, hold on. My spotlight is falling off its perch here. Sorry, so animated. Given that we are now rebalancing, fewer people are being born, we're facing older societies, and the number one growth category they saw was health. So anything to do with health, whether it's curing sick or like doping, making sure you think better and more in gyms and all that. The biggest shrinking category in this rebalanced world was education. Not because learning is not important, but because the way we have learned is shifting. It used to be that all the education you got early on in life, it was like a rocket or a firework, right? Lots of gunpowder, went into the sky, it would last the rest of your life. Exactly like love. If you fell in love in your 20s, that love would last the rest of your life. That's not the case anymore. So I would say, students, if you're a student today, be young, be foolish, be experimental, dare to be wrong. Take your time to be wrong. But education and learning is something we will have to do booster shots of continuously, whether it's through seminars or paid programs or Socratic dialogues with AI. And we've only started to scratch the surface of that world. The new Rust Belt is going to be college towns. Learning will be omni-channel 24/7.
So basically, you are on this webinar, the audience here, you are learning. And
it's a booster shot, yeah.
This is the booster shot,
like vaccination, yeah.
Yeah. All right, we're out of time, but Magnus and I will sit down in the virtual lounge for the next 30 minutes or so. So and there's more to read. There's the Maturity Matrix of Startups. They will be there at our Innovate event at June 3rd. There's the website for Magnus. There's the book. I really recommend it. It's a great book. It gives you some other insights in this confusing world of AI. So with that, I would like to thank the audience for watching, either live or in the recording. And Magnus, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for now, and see you later on, maybe in the next webinar or in the lounge right after this. Thank you, and bye-bye.